High performance teams. The people you normally don't like because they tell you how things really work. Or the ones who you don't like because they should tell you how things work and do not work, but they actually don't, and they're still praised by senior leadership. So where's the problem with high performance teams and how do they actually work? And it was quite interesting when we received emails about this question. Many of you refer to different bands. Also, obviously music, the emotional boundaries, the emotional limits, the emotional environment of music seems to be quite stimulating for many. So many refer to either the Rolling Stones or even Take That or boy groups like One Direction, which you most likely will know from your children if you still remember it. Many, of course, also refer to football for our American listeners, to soccer. Liverpool, congratulations for winning Premier League. I don't want to say it's about the German coach you have, the German manager you have, but no, of course. Congratulations for winning Premier League. Very impressive performance. I'm a fan of the Hamburg Football Club, who just impressively had a chance to get into the relegation for the promotion back from the second Bundesliga to Bundesliga and managed to lose at home 1-5 against a team that ranks 10th. As we always say, I don't want to talk about it. So getting back to high performance teams. When we talk about high performance teams, many decisions are made on arbitrary feelings rather than facts. You heard something about high performance teams, you Google a bit, and then of course you always take different industries. Either it's a band or a sports team, and then you transfer it into your environment. And unfortunately, this does not hold against scientific evidence. This does not hold against real world practice. So what's the deal with high performance teams? If you want to have a high performance team, we go through a couple of myths which we have in the first place, and then we give you 3 very specific steps you have to implement to get high performance teams. So first, often when you refer to high performance teams, you think of people who just sit together all day long, no matter if it's business time or leisure time, they just see each other every day. And sometimes this is the case. And sometimes you met people who became very good friends at work and then spent time outside of work as well. That might happen, but it is the exception and not the rule. And especially when you're trying to put it in scene. So you put people in a certain environment, say, oh, you now have to work together, spend time together in your leisure time, and you force them to become some sort of fake friends. That is not how it works. So myth number 1, you think that high-performing teams are always together. That is not the case. When you look into very successful high-performing teams, you often see people work together professionally, but their private lives are very different. If you look into musicians, if you look into sports teams, and if you look into the business world, many very highly successful teams work together professionally, but their private lives are very different. And that can have many different reasons. I'll just give you an example. So when I look back on what I've done in the recent past, and according to the testimonials I received, I worked together successfully in quite a number of different and very different circumstances, different countries, different cities, different places, different situations, successfully. Still, due to the fact that I am not married, I am single, I still have one hobby which many people do not have anymore. I like to go out and listen to electronic music, which normally happens in clubs during the night. Normally it starts from about 1 a.m. And many people say, I can't do that, I have children. And it's perfectly fine, you don't have to go with me. And please don't pretend that you like my music when you don't. Also, when you say, oh, we have this nice children's festival and we all go there, if I go with you, it is very challenging for me to have any common topic because I don't have children. I don't know how it is when you have to buy new clothes or when they go from elementary school to high school to college. I have no idea about that. And I don't pretend that I have. So get away from the idea that your high performance teams must hang out every single day. So myth number 1, always together. No. Myth number 2, high-performing teams must know each other forever or for a very long time. Not true. Especially when you see in today's world. When we have today's situation where people work from a distance, and of course especially with, for example, software development, that happened for a long time already. These teams work very well together and they are really high-performance teams, and often they only knew each other from calls, from emails, and then they just work it like that. And they are still high-performing teams. You don't have to know each other forever. Often people bring in this we have to know each other for a very long time, because then they can say, oh, we made good experiences. Professor Cunning from Germany always says, as soon as a manager or a senior executive says we made good experience, or we have good experience made in the past, or had good experience in recent project, that normally means I have someone from my network. I judge my own work with telling that my own work was great because I chose that person, and I want to keep the person due to personal systems of power. That has nothing to do with having the best in mind for your organization. That is simply something which you do to keep yourself in the position where you are. And that comes directly together with myth number 3. People must come from the same network. When you only choose people from the same network, you get one problem. All these people are pretty much the same, which means in one area you will be very good because you see everything you need to see and you solve everything you see. And in other areas, you don't even see the challenge until it suddenly happens, and then you have to try and fix it. So if you say they must be always together, myth number 1, wrong. Myth number 2, know each other for a very long time, not necessarily needed. It's nice when it happens, but it's not necessarily needed. Myth number 3, they have to come from the same network. Absolutely not true. And myth number 4 is that you say high performance teams have to inspire other teams to become better. So with one high performing team, we expect all the other teams to become better as well. It would be such a great place in the working world if that actually happened. But let's face it. Let's say we have sales teams. We have region A and we have region B. That is the most efficient way how to label things. And I'm German, so I'm obsessed with efficiency. So region A is performing very well, region B is not. So you decide that you take a couple of salespeople from region A into region B because these great people will inspire the rest to become better. And exactly the opposite happens. The people will adopt to the average level of performance. They might do well, they might probably even be the best in their team, but they are far, far less great, and they are not even close to the performance they had in Team A. And often this comes down to leadership problems. So when, for example, these teams are led by different people, or you have someone who prefers one region over the other, or someone has different regions and doesn't spot the cultural differences in how people work, then of course you suddenly have 2 teams. One is performing well, one is not, and it's not the team's fault, it's the leadership person's fault. I know it's a hard pill to swallow because many of you who listen to this are in a leadership position. But as long as you, I always quote Jay Mann, who I recently quoted from Barclay Card. He said, and he's a portfolio manager there, he said on social media, it's not a shame to be late to a party as long as you arrive there. So it is a hard pill to swallow when you say, oh, it's my leadership fault. Yes, it is. But as long as you see it, people will always appreciate it. You will have higher employee motivation and lower employee turnover, and due to this, higher productivity. So how can you now do better? There are 3 main steps you have to implement. Step number 1, have a proper, open, transparent selection process. And the selection process for the team is not based on you pick someone and tell that person just pick all the others, because that person will always tend to take people who do not challenge too much and people who are personally quite similar, so they get along well personally, so it's not really stressful. When you have a high-performing team in an organization, we all know when you get this call from the accounting department and they say, oh, your expenses report, there is something missing. There's always something missing. It is, in my opinion, close to impossible to file an expenses report without that it comes back at least once because something's missing. I am fully aware that expenses reports need to be correct, because otherwise during the audit it all will be a big problem. And of course these people annoy you when they call you, but you know that in your organization you need these people, and of course that makes your organization a better one. Unfortunately, when it comes to teams, people tend to not select the people who might be a bit of a nuisance because they say, oh, I don't want to have these people around. I want to make people just work like I normally prefer to work. That is due to a fact which is called isomorphism. Iso is Greek for equal and morphism for the same appearance. Morph, you may have heard of that. So people select other people who are exactly like them. And when you look into, for example, into the management school in St. Gallen in Switzerland, where Dr. Gabriele Schambach published articles on different aspects of equality and gender and how teams are selected and how diversity is perceived, Often she could, no, not often, every single time she could see that people look alike. This is why you often have these pictures of teams in the corporate world, and you always, when you just see the picture and then you put a blank piece of color over just a white piece or black piece of paper over their head. So you only see their bodies, and suddenly you couldn't even know who is who because they all look the same. Dark suit, white shirt, dark tie. And still, these kind of organizations say, oh, we're so diverse. No, you're not. So step number 1, have a proper selection process based on proper criteria. So for example, when you want to have someone and you really know someone who you like, but that person probably lived in London, grew up in London, went to school in London, and then worked in London, but now you suddenly need someone who leads an international team, maybe someone who has to lead diverse teams in different countries with different approaches towards work or punctuality or how they work in terms of structure, how they get approached. Maybe you need someone who speaks more than one language. So when you need someone with international experience, someone who not only worked but also lived in different countries, you have to step away from your personally preferred candidate. So have an openly transparent selection process. Step number 2, diverse teams are better. You can look into different articles. There's much out there. Just go on scholar.google.com, and science is completely unambiguous about the fact that diverse teams perform better. And that is not even surprising. Let's just make it very simple. We just start a project and it's called Children's Birthday. And you now have 2 candidates. Candidate number 1 is me, Niels Brabant. Single, no children, but has lots of time, so he will never be sick due to some sort of circumstances. He's really available, hardworking, traveled the world, lived all over the place, worked in different and diverse teams, etc., etc. And then you have someone else, maybe Mrs. Smith or Mr. Smith, married, 2 children, and these children went all the way from small village to somewhere all over the world. So they now pay their own bills, live their own life. Who would you ask? Would you say, oh, Niels Brabant, I just like him personally and I had good experiences with him and I think he's a good guy and hardworking? No, because I have no clue about children's parties. I have no clue about birthday parties for children because I don't have any. It is very important that diverse teams, when you have more diverse teams, you will always see more problems earlier and you solve them proactively, rather than having non-diverse teams who are good in one area and run into hundreds, if not thousands of other problems and then play the blame game and try to catch up with these problems which they should have seen in the first place. So that's step 2, diversity. Step number 3, oh, by the way, often, especially when it comes to team organization and leadership, many people ask, oh, do you have articles and writing, etc.? Yes, we do. You find it in the show notes of this podcast. Just go for expert-letter.nb-networks.com. That's our weekly expert letter. 100% content, 0% advertising. There is never advertising in there because we work based on content and science. So feel free to join. There are different topics and different articles every week. So step number 1, just getting this back together. Step number 1, proper and transparent selection process. Step number 2, have diverse teams, not the teams where they all look the same. And step number 3, you need the best circumstances for your team. And of course, now people will say, what does that mean? What are the best circumstances? Because isn't there a quite high likelihood that when I ask them for the best circumstances, they may claim for too much? So first, from 21 and a half years, I am now self-employed for 21 and a half years, and I have no idea, hundreds and hundreds of projects, some of them with very high performing teams, and I simply have never seen in the corporate world someone who is employed, works in a high performing team, and deliberately, or even not deliberately, they simply don't claim for too much. Often when people say they claim for too much or they want too much, it's only about that they challenge the status quo. I just give you an example. Someone starts a development team because they want to get into e-commerce more, because they have an online shop and they need more conversion rate. So one person starts, then a couple of people were hired, selected, and then of course you need equipment. And then that person says, okay, we need, and I just pick one because I just remember that case very specifically. The person says, we need Apple notebooks due to XYZ. Okay, perfect. Next day, someone from the IT department calls and says, hello, Mr. New Development Team Leader. I just want to inform you, we don't do Apple, we only have Microsoft. And then, of course, you ask, oh, okay, why? And then they said, because we only have Microsoft. That's just a general rule, so you can only get a Microsoft laptop. That person who was just newly hired was very frustrating, spoke to someone from the board of directors who got that person on board and said, look, you promised me the best circumstances, and without giving me a reason, but just drawing an arbitrary line in the sand saying, sorry, Apple, not happening here, I should now work in an environment which, in my opinion, due to X, Y, Z reasons, is less productive than when I got Apple. So phone call from the board of directors to the IT department, and there we are. Suddenly Apple was not a problem. And now, of course, you will say, oh, that would never happen with us. Let's face it, it does. And I'll just give you two examples, one of the past and one which we have right now. Maybe you remember in the beginning of 2000 when we had these kind of wars in the department. It's either Microsoft or it is Linux. It's never both. And suddenly they found out, oh, it both has advantages, disadvantages. You can actually use both. Yes, different systems have different advantages and disadvantages. Who could have thought? Very surprising, isn't it? So, or something which we have right now. Still, I meet people who say, oh, we can't use Zoom for meetings because Zoom is banned here. So then of course I say, why? And then they say, oh, security issues. When I ask what security issues, they often say, oh, you know which one I mean. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And what they refer to is when the whole COVID-19 thing began and the crisis started and people jumped on Zoom. And so first, most of the people who started online meetings were never professionally trained, which means you're using a remote tool where you speak about most likely data protection relevant or even highly secret aspects of your business, and you allow people to use a tool without receiving training on it. That is pure madness. So train people on your tool, because most of these so-called security issues were not Zoom security issues. People were using the public meeting ID and just putting on meetings with no password, or they had a password like 123 or admin or just the word password, which is insane. So give them proper training and suddenly all these things will disappear. And meanwhile, the very small and minor security glitches which Zoom had are all fixed a long time ago. It's just a lazy IT department that says, oh no, we just draw an arbitrary line in the sand, so we say no to this. And then you have to deal with another tool, which most likely is not that great. And people say, oh, I can't share this, oh, I can't make this happen, I can't do that on this tool. And then you have to live with it because the IT says no. And by the way, I am not blaming IT departments. In 99% of all cases, when something goes wrong, the blame is not to be taken by the IT department. In most businesses, they are wildly underfunded, while at the same time, there are highest expectations towards the service they deliver to your business. And due to the fact that often in IT, people put hobby, life, and job together and work their off to make it work, they somehow magically make it happen. So IT departments in 99% of all cases are doing a brilliant job. Just suddenly we had one issue with Zoom. And by the way, here again, it is a leadership issue. When you have IT departments who suddenly think Zoom should be banned, they are so afraid of lifting the ban. That also is a very clear feedback about what your leadership culture is. And obviously it's a leadership culture of blame game and fear. Always block everything to make it more safe, which of course cannot be the approach to run a proper business. So aspect number 3, give them the best environment. When you have someone who asks for something where you say, we normally would not do that, ask for the reason why they need it. And in most cases, they will give you a proper reason. And by the way, when often people say, oh, we can't give them the best circumstances because we have budget restraints, especially at the moment, high-performing teams, which I saw in certain circumstances, worked under tremendous pressure and tremendous budget restraints, and they were still high-performing teams in most cases because they made the best out of the budget. So step number 1, so getting this together, step number 1, proper selection process, a transparent one. Step number 2, diverse teams. And step number 3, give them the best environment you could ever ask for. Then you will have high-performing teams. I wish you all the best implementing that in your organization. And for today, thank you very much for your time.